these kids off my property, Sal. Right now!
I'm kneeling by the campfire, showing 8-year-old Tommy how to roast his first golden marshmallow, when this HOA president in a crisp white pantsuit storms through the smoke like she owns the ranch. Constance Hartwell, the queen who calls cops on kids for laughing too loud. She stomps around our family lake camp, shrieking about illegal camping and community violations as sweet wood smoke clashes with her sharp perfume. The kids freeze, s'mores forgotten. Then she dials 911, reporting unauthorized operations on association land. The epic twist? She's standing right on my private ranch lake property. Grandfather's ironclad deed and surveys prove it. That call just turned her trespass into a $2.3 million payout and bought these kids their dream permanent lakeside spot. Karma's sweeter than any toasted marshmallow. What would you do if an HOA Karen crashed your family campfire? Share your wildest neighbor wars below. 6 months ago, I inherited every redneck's dream. 47 acres of Texas hill country with a spring-fed lake so clear you can count the scales on a bass swimming 20 feet down. Pops Morrison spent 40 years turning Scrub Ranch into paradise, complete with a swimming hole that stays cool enough to shock you awake in August. His dying words? Keep that lake open for kids, Dex. Don't let some uptight subdivision turn childhood into a federal offense. How hard could that be, right? Turns out Pops had been running Camp Minnow since 1987. Every Saturday, parents dumped their spawn for fishing lessons, campfire stories, and the radical concept of getting dirty outside. No charge, just kids being kids instead of staring at screens. The morning of my first camp, sweet honeysuckle mixed with coffee steam as 25 children discovered you can actually catch fish with your hands if you're patient enough. Gravel crunched under minivans while parents escaped for blessed weekend freedom. The sound of genuine laughter bouncing off water, that's when I got what Pops was really protecting. Then Satan showed up wearing designer heels. Constance Hartwell makes suburban dictators look reasonable. This woman runs Willowbrook Estates like Stalin ran Russia. 300 terrified homeowners living in 400K, 600K fear of breaking her sacred rules. She's the type who measures grass height with actual rulers and calls cops on kids riding bikes too enthusiastically. 3 months ago, she glided over with that fake smile rich people use when addressing the help. Mr. Morrison, surely you realize these weekend activities are devastating our property values. The noise, the traffic, the complete disruption of our serene community. I whipped out Pops's deed, clear as daylight, private property since 1952. She examined those documents like they contained nuclear launch codes, then retreated to her fortress of evil, muttering about researching available legal remedies. Translation: you just made an enemy, grease monkey. Knowledge nugget: in property disputes, always have your surveyor's map and recorded deed ready. Texas law requires documented evidence before anyone can challenge your land use. Paperwork trumps Karen tantrums every damn time. Within 2 weeks, she launched her systematic destruction campaign, filed complaints with county health about unlicensed childcare, called the fire marshal about unauthorized burning, even contacted child services about unsupervised swimming activities. The health inspector showed up Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand, expecting to find Lord of the Flies. Instead, he found spotless facilities, proper first aid supplies, and safety protocols that put most public pools to shame. Ma'am, he told Constance over the phone, there's literally nothing wrong here. Her nuclear weapon? Social media character assassination. Facebook posts about liability nightmares and safety violations spread through parent groups like wildfire. Camp attendance crashed from 30 kids to 15 as families chose HOA approval over adventure. The diesel smell from my beat-up Chevy started mixing with disappointment instead of excitement as smaller groups arrived each weekend. Parents whispered apologies. They supported camp but couldn't risk becoming Constance's next target. She'd already destroyed 2 neighbors over fence height violations and unauthorized mailbox colors. One family moved after she fined them $50 weekly for keeping Christmas lights up past January 2nd. That's when clarity hit like a sledgehammer. This wasn't about noise or property values. This was pure power addiction. Constance couldn't stomach children enjoying something beyond her iron-fisted control. She literally couldn't sleep knowing kids were having unsanctioned fun within her visual range. But here's the beautiful irony. While researching ways to murder Camp Minnow, she never investigated what Pops had actually secured when he bought this land. City folks think property ownership means house plus yard. Old school ranchers secured mineral rights, water access, pipeline easements, and legal clauses that would make corporate lawyers weep with joy. During one particularly quiet evening, after watching only 8 kids enjoy what used to be 30-kid chaos, I started digging through Pops's legendary filing system. That's when I discovered the first piece of what would become Constance's multi-million-dollar education. She wanted war. She was about to learn why you never fight someone whose grandfather was smarter than your entire HOA board combined. Constance wasn't content with simple complaints. She wanted total psychological warfare. Week 3 of her campaign, I'm fixing a busted hydraulic line on my truck when I notice movement along my fence line. 5 HOA members dressed like they're heading to a country club, walking the perimeter of my property with notebooks and cameras. They called it Neighborhood Watch. I called it Trespassing Reconnaissance. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., Constance's little patrol marched along my fence, documenting violations. Kids arriving for camp? Excessive traffic. Sound of children laughing? Noise pollution? Smoke from our evening campfire? Air quality concerns. They were building a case file thicker than a phone book for imaginary crimes. The sharp scent of fear mixed with morning dew as parents started dropping off their kids with worried expressions instead of smiles. You could feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. Friday evenings became her specialty. She'd file noise complaints precisely at 6 p.m., knowing our campfires started at 6:30. Sheriff Jake would roll up, apologize for the call, find absolutely nothing wrong, then drive away shaking his head. But the psychological damage was done. Parents started questioning whether they were putting their kids at risk. Her lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter that would have made Putin proud. Unauthorized use of water resources in violation of community easement agreements. The woman was claiming my own lake belonged to her subdivision somehow. I laughed until I read the fine print. She was actually threatening to sue for disruption of peaceful enjoyment under some obscure county ordinance. But Constance's masterstroke was social media warfare. She created a Facebook group called Willowbrook Safety Alliance and started posting daily incident reports, pictures of kids swimming without life jackets, videos of unsupervised minors operating watercraft, aka children in inner tubes. She even posted photos of our campfire claiming we were operating unpermitted burning facilities near residential areas. Camp attendance dropped to 12 kids. Parents started showing up with liability waivers they wanted me to sign, worried about insurance coverage. The joy was getting sucked out of something that should have been pure childhood magic. That's when I remembered something Pops used to say. Before you go to war, son, make sure you know where all the bodies are buried, especially your enemies. During one of those quiet evenings, I started researching Willowbrook Estate's own legal history. Turns out rich people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. I found their original development permits and, surprise, surprise, they'd cut some serious corners. See, I'd learned from dealing with environmental regulations at the shop that any construction within 100 feet of protected waterways requires state permits. My lake feeds into Cypress Creek, designated as protected watershed. Guess what Constance's precious HOA never filed? Environmental impact studies for their community gazebo, fishing pier, and decorative bridge. The violations could trigger fines starting at $50,000 per structure. I made one anonymous phone call to Texas Parks and Wildlife. Tuesday morning, a state environmental inspector showed up with a clipboard and attitude. By afternoon, Constance had 3 violation notices and orders to cease all community facility use pending permit review. Her gazebo, where she held court every Sunday morning, was suddenly off limits. The phone started ringing that evening, not parents calling to pull kids from camp, but Willowbrook residents wanting to know what was happening to their amenities. Constance had been so busy attacking my property, she'd exposed her own illegal activities. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Margaret Pine, retired 3rd-grade teacher and secret camp supporter, approached me during a chance encounter at the feed store. The smell of feed grain and leather filled the air as she whispered something that changed everything. Your Pops came to see me about 6 months before he passed, said he'd been dealing with HOA pressure for years but had insurance they didn't know about. Mentioned keeping important papers in the old barn workshop behind his welding bench. The crunch of gravel under my boots echoed differently as I walked to grandfather's workshop that evening. 30 years of accumulated ranch tools, spare parts, and memories filled every corner. But Margaret was right. Tucked behind his welding bench was a fireproof filing cabinet I'd somehow missed during a state cleanup. Inside wasn't just property documents. It was 40 years of correspondence with energy companies, lawyers, and surveyors, maps showing mineral deposits extending far beyond what I'd inherited. And one document that made my hands shake, a 1987 natural gas lease agreement with clauses that would turn Constance's harassment campaign into the most expensive mistake in HOA history. She'd been so focused on destroying kids' fishing camp, she never realized she was attacking someone who controlled the mineral rights under her entire subdivision. The war just became a rout, and she didn't even know it yet. Reading grandfather's files was like discovering buried treasure, except this treasure could bankrupt an entire subdivision. The 1987 natural gas lease wasn't just some dusty old contract, it was a legal atomic bomb with a 40-year fuse, and Constance had been jumping up and down on the detonator without knowing it. Pops had leased mineral rights to Lone Star Energy for $180,000, massive money back then, but the really beautiful part was buried in the fine print. Perpetual surface access easement across all adjacent properties for pipeline installation, maintenance, and expansion as deemed necessary by lessee. Translation: the energy company could tear up every manicured lawn in Willowbrook Estates whenever they wanted, and there wasn't a damn thing the HOA could do about it. While I was absorbing this bombshell, Constance was escalating her personal vendetta to psychotic levels. She hired a private investigator to photograph kids with fishing poles like he was documenting international arms dealing. This guy sat in a sedan every weekend, telephoto lens trained on 8-year-olds catching bluegill. The absurdity was breathtaking, but her real masterpiece was the parent harassment campaign. She started calling families at work with urgent liability warnings. Showed up at soccer practices spreading horror stories about drowning risks and insurance nightmares. One mom told me Constance actually followed her to the grocery store, lecturing her about child endangerment, while she tried to buy milk. The psychological warfare was working. Camp attendance crashed to 8 kids, only the families whose children would rather face HOA hell than give up their fishing weekends. The acrid smell of stress sweat mixed with morning coffee as parents dropped off their kids, looking over their shoulders like they were committing crimes. Then Constance made her biggest mistake. Her attorney sent me a lawsuit threat claiming my lake activities violated community water resource easements. The woman was literally trying to steal my inheritance using legal mumbo-jumbo and pure audacity. That's when I called Sarah Salem, energy attorney and corporate shark, disguised as a petite Asian woman who looked like she should be teaching kindergarten instead of devouring HOA lawyers for lunch. "Dex," she said after reviewing grandfather's documents, "you don't just own surface rights. You control pipeline access that could affect every single property in Willowbrook. This easement predates their subdivision by 15 years. I remembered something Pops used to say while teaching me engine repair. Before you tear apart someone's motor, son, make sure you know how your own engine works. Time to research Constance's vulnerabilities. Turns out Willowbrook Estates was more fragile than wet cardboard. 3 years of budget shortfalls covered with special assessments that had homeowners ready to revolt. Any major legal expense would trigger bankruptcy proceedings faster than you could say foreclosure. Better yet, none of their homes were sold with mineral rights disclosures. Constance and her neighbors bought their properties without knowing about potential energy development underneath their foundations. Their property values were built on ignorance, and that ignorance was about to get very expensive. The sweet irony made my head spin. While Constance was trying to destroy my property rights, she was standing on land I technically controlled access to. Every complaint she filed, every patrol she organized, every threat she made, she was essentially trespassing on easement property. Sarah spread satellite maps across her conference table like battle plans. The pipeline route ran directly under Willowbrook's community center, tennis courts, and 40 residential lots. If Lone Star decided to upgrade infrastructure, they could legally demolish half the subdivision. "Here's where it gets beautiful," Sarah explained, her finger tracing the pipeline path. "Texas law gives mineral rights holders extensive remedies for surface interference. If someone harasses the property owner and disrupts energy operations, they're financially liable for lost production revenue." The afternoon sun streamed through her office windows, illuminating documents that would reshape Constance's world. I could practically taste the panic that would fill Willowbrook when residents learned their dream neighborhood was built on someone else's mineral rights. But Sarah had even better news. Current natural gas deposits in your area are worth $2.8 million for new drilling rights. The lease expires next year, and Lone Star's been trying to contact you for months about renewal. That's when inspiration struck like lightning. Instead of just defending against Constance's attacks, I could flip the entire game, let her think she was winning while I prepared the nuclear option. But first I needed to let her dig the hole deeper. Constance still thought she was fighting some dumb mechanic over kids fishing. She had no idea she'd declared war on someone who could literally pave her subdivision if he wanted to. The best part? She was about to hand me the perfect excuse to use that power. Constance was about to learn the difference between picking a fight and picking the wrong fight. While she was busy terrorizing parents and hiring private investigators, I was orchestrating the most beautiful revenge plot in Texas HOA history. The woman wanted to play legal hardball? Fine. But she was bringing a Nerf gun to a nuclear war. First step, let her think she was winning. I started accidentally leaving documents visible on my truck dashboard when her spy photographer showed up. Fake correspondence with lawyers about property boundary disputes and easement concerns. Nothing incriminating, just enough to make her think I was scrambling to defend my crumbling position. The bait worked like a charm. Constance practically skipped around her morning fence patrol, cell phone glued to her ear, updating her lawyer about my obvious legal panic. I could hear her shrill voice carrying across the water. "He's clearly desperate. Push harder on the injunction." Within a week, she filed for an emergency court order to cease all unauthorized commercial activities pending boundary resolution. She was so focused on delivering the killing blow, she never noticed I was quietly setting up the chessboard for checkmate. My real preparation was happening in grandfather's barn. The smell of motor oil mixed with fresh coffee as Sarah and I researched every angle of the mineral rights situation. What we discovered was better than finding oil in your backyard. The 1987 lease included penalty clauses that made my head spin. Any interference with authorized surface access triggered fines starting at $2.3 million. And here's the beautiful part. Interference was defined as any action preventing the mineral rights holder from full enjoyment of surface access privileges. Constance's entire harassment campaign wasn't just annoying. It was federally actionable under energy law. I started documenting everything with obsessive precision. Photos of her surveillance squad, recordings of threatening calls to parents, screenshots of Facebook posts claiming I operated dangerous illegal facilities. Every piece of evidence carefully cataloged like I was building a murder case. Then came the inspiration that would make this whole thing legendary. Instead of just defending against her attacks, I'd force her into the perfect trap. A public meeting where she'd have to choose between backing down or making the mistake that would cost her everything. I scheduled a community future planning meeting for the following Saturday. Made it sound routine, just neighbors discussing balancing development with community interests. Invited everyone, energy executives, HOA board, county commissioners, local media. Constance bit so hard she nearly broke her teeth. Started rallying Willowbrook residents for what she called the final battle against commercial exploitation. Posted on Facebook about reclaiming our community. Organized carpools to pack my meeting with supporters. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush. The genius was letting her choose the battlefield. Instead of fighting on HOA turf where she controlled the narrative, I was forcing her onto my property where federal mineral rights law trumped every local ordinance. Every step she took on my land would be documented, witnessed, and legally actionable. But Constance's desperation was making her sloppy. She contacted County Health 3 times in 1 week with increasingly ridiculous complaints. Claimed our campfire smoke caused respiratory distress to residents 200 yards away. Even tried getting animal control involved, saying fishing was harassing protected species. The woman had lost her damn mind, and it was beautiful. Each escalation gave me more evidence of systematic harassment. Sarah explained that federal courts took a dim view of organized campaigns against mineral rights operations. The thicker our documentation file, the stronger our legal nuclear weapon became. Then Constance made the mistake that sealed her fate. She convinced the HOA board to authorize protective legal action for my alleged encroachment on community resources. They voted to spend $50,000 fighting for ownership of Grandfather's Lake. She was literally trying to steal my inheritance using her neighbor's HOA dues. The audacity was breathtaking, but it triggered the final piece of my strategy. Under Texas law, Frivolous claims against documented mineral rights triggered automatic countersuits for attorney fees and punitive damages. Constance wasn't just harassing me anymore, she was officially interfering with federally protected energy operations. The trap was perfect. The community meeting would bring everyone together where Constance would inevitably make one final power play. And when she stepped foot on my property to assert her authority, she'd trigger every penalty clause grandfather had negotiated 37 years ago. I spent that evening sitting on the dock, watching sunset paint the lake gold while kids' laughter echoed from the day's final fishing session. The irony was delicious. Constance's obsession with destroying childhood joy was about to fund it permanently. The meeting was tomorrow. The bait was set. All I needed was for Constance to be exactly as arrogant and controlling as she'd always been. Something told me she wouldn't disappoint. Saturday evening, the golden hour when everything should have been perfect. 20 kids were enjoying our final campfire of the regular season, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories while their parents relaxed on blankets nearby. The sweet smell of wood smoke mixed with honeysuckle as families savored what had become their weekly tradition. Then Constance arrived like the four horsemen of the apocalypse, except in designer heels and a crisp white pantsuit. She came prepared for war. 3 HOA board members flanked her like backup singers, each carrying cameras and notebooks. They'd clearly planned this assault for maximum emotional damage, right in front of families with young children. "Get these kids off my property, right now!" Her shriek shattered the peaceful evening like nails on a chalkboard. 8-year-old Tommy dropped his marshmallow into the fire while his little sister started crying. Parents instinctively moved closer to their children, confused by this sudden invasion of their family time. I stayed kneeling by the campfire, helping kids with their s'mores, deliberately calm. "Evening, Constance. You're on private property. Again. This is association land according to our survey." She waved papers like they were holy scripture, stomping deeper into my campsite with each word. "These children are trespassing and you're operating an illegal commercial facility." The irony was delicious. While screaming about illegal activities, Constance marched across my property line, her designer heels sinking into soft earth as she positioned herself between the campfire and lake. Her board member cronies spread out behind her, documenting everything with their phones. They were so focused on their grand, dramatic moment, they never noticed me documenting them right back. "Ma'am, you need to leave," I said quietly, standing slowly. "You're trespassing on private property." "I'm calling 911 right now." She whipped out her phone with theatrical flourish. "I'm reporting unauthorized camping operations on association land." The contrast was stark. Peaceful families enjoying nature versus entitled suburbanite having a public meltdown. Parents started recording her breakdown while children huddled closer, confused why this angry woman was yelling at them for roasting marshmallows. Constance dialed with shaking fingers. "This is Constance Hartwell, president of Willowbrook Estates HOA. I need immediate police response for trespassing and unauthorized commercial operations on association property." While she ranted into her phone, I calmly called Sarah Salem. "It's happening. She's on my property, threatening families, claiming ownership. Everything's recorded." "Perfect," Sarah whispered back. "Don't engage. Let her bury herself." And bury herself she did. For 15 minutes, Constance lectured terrified children about liability issues while standing illegally on my land. She even tried ordering parents to remove these children before someone gets hurt. When Sheriff Deputy Jake arrived, his body camera captured the absurd scene. Constance standing in my campsite, surrounded by scattered camping supplies and crying children, screaming about trespassing while being the actual trespasser. "Ma'am," Jake said after checking GPS and property markers, "you're standing on Mr. Morrison's private land. This entire campsite is his property." Constance's face went through several colors, confusion, then dawning horror as she realized her mistake. But it was too late. She'd already made the call, already claimed ownership, already terrorized families while standing on land that wasn't hers. The beautiful part? When she'd stepped onto my property to make that 911 call, she'd triggered the unauthorized entry clause in grandfather's mineral rights lease, the same clause that carried a $2.3 million penalty for interfering with surface access rights. Her phone call wasn't just harassment, it was a federal violation of energy law, witnessed by 20 families and recorded by law enforcement. Constance had just turned her obsession with destroying kids' fishing camp into the most expensive tantrum in Texas history. Monday morning, I walked into Sarah Salem's law office carrying a briefcase that felt like Christmas, birthday, and lottery ticket all rolled into one. "Please tell me you got everything," she said, clearing her conference table with the excitement of a kid opening presents. "Better than everything. I got a federal case with a bow on top." The body camera footage from Deputy Jake was pure prosecutorial poetry. 20 minutes of Constance screaming about trespassing while standing on my property, claiming ownership of land that's been in my family since Eisenhower was president. The crisp audio captured every word of her 911 call. "I'm reporting unauthorized operations on association property." Those 8 words just became the most expensive sentence in HOA history. Sarah pulled up grandfather's mineral rights lease, highlighting the penalty clause in neon yellow like a legal treasure map. Under federal energy law, any interference with surface access rights triggers automatic financial penalties. She didn't just trespass, she actively disrupted authorized mineral rights operations while falsely claiming ownership. The timing was chef's kiss perfect. Constance had made her move thinking she'd intimidate me into submission before my community meeting. Instead, she'd waltzed into a federal crime with 20 witnesses and law enforcement documentation. I spread the parent testimonies across Sarah's mahogany table like poker cards showing a royal flush. 12 families provided written statements describing how this suburban dictator invaded their peaceful evening and terrorized children for the crime of roasting marshmallows. These weren't vengeful neighbors. These were soccer moms and little league dads horrified by what they'd witnessed. The sharp scent of legal paperwork mixed with Sarah's jasmine tea as she reviewed our evidence mountain. Federal courts take energy rights violations seriously because they involve interstate commerce. This isn't some neighborhood squabble anymore. It's a federal case. Tuesday morning, my phone started ringing off the hook. But instead of angry HOA members, I got terrified Willowbrook residents who'd seen Constance's meltdown spreading across social media like wildfire. Parents had posted videos of her breakdown, and local Facebook groups exploded with 847 shares in 12 hours. Channel 8 News picked up the story by evening. HOA president trespasses while claiming property ownership led their broadcast, complete with interviews of traumatized kids and their shell-shocked parents. The reporter found Margaret Pine, who'd been quietly supporting Camp Minnow all along. "That woman terrorized babies with fishing poles," Margaret said on camera, her teacher voice cutting through bullshit with surgical precision. She claimed ownership of land that's been in the Morrison family since before her subdivision was even a twinkle in some developer's eye. By Wednesday, the story went statewide. Texas Property Rights Alliance adopted my case as prime evidence of HOA overreach and suburban tyranny. Environmental groups rallied around protecting kids' outdoor education. Even energy industry publications covered the mineral rights angle. Constance tried damage control, but every statement dug her hole deeper. She told reporters she was protecting community safety while standing on disputed property. Except there was no dispute. My deed was clearer than a bell, and she'd never filed any legal challenge before her trespassing rampage. But the investigation revealed something even juicier than her Saturday night meltdown. Forensic accounting showed Constance had blown $73,000 in community funds on her personal vendetta against my camp. Private investigators, attorney fees, emergency legal actions, all paid with neighbors' dues without board approval. 3 years of financial records painted a masterpiece of systematic abuse, inflated contracts with her brother-in-law's landscaping company, mysterious consulting fees paid to companies that existed only on paper, personal spa treatments charged to HOA credit cards as stress management for community leadership. The woman hadn't just committed federal trespassing. She'd been running a personal ATM machine using her neighbor's money. Thursday brought news that made me want to dance in the streets. Lone Star Energy's corporate attorney called about enforcing the penalty clause. They'd been monitoring the situation since Sarah contacted them, and they were absolutely thrilled to collect $3 million from the HOA instead of negotiating new lease terms with me. "Mr. Morrison," the attorney explained with barely contained glee, "your grandfather was exceptionally thorough. That penalty clause was designed specifically to protect mineral rights holders from organized harassment campaigns. Ms. Hartwell's actions constitute textbook interference under federal energy law. Justice moved with beautiful precision. Federal complaint filed, civil lawsuit prepared, criminal referral submitted for embezzlement charges, HOA insurance company notified about coverage exclusions for board member criminal activity. The sweetest moment came Friday afternoon when Willowbrook residents held an emergency meeting and voted Constance out of every position she held. New leadership was elected with a single mandate: clean house and make amends. Within hours, the new HOA president called me directly. "Mr. Morrison, we sincerely apologize for Mrs. Hartwell's actions and want to discuss resolving the situation for everyone's benefit." The trap had worked beyond my wildest dreams. Constance's obsession with destroying childhood joy had just funded it for the next 50 years. Cornered animals do stupid things. Cornered HOA presidents do spectacularly stupid things while live streaming the process. By Monday morning, Constance was facing federal charges, civil lawsuits, criminal embezzlement referrals, and social media infamy that made her the patron saint of suburban tyranny. Any reasonable person would have hired a crisis attorney and moved to Montana. But Constance wasn't reasonable. She was desperate, humiliated, and absolutely fucking furious. Her first move was classic Karen escalation, trying to buy her way out of federal crimes. Tuesday afternoon, she contacted Lone Star Energy directly, completely bypassing me and my attorneys. "There's been a misunderstanding about property boundaries," she told their corporate lawyer with the confidence of someone who'd never read a legal document. "Willowbrook Estates is prepared to support energy development and compensate Mr. Morrison reasonably for this inconvenience." The energy company's response was swift and brutal. They immediately reported her attempted interference to federal authorities. Trying to circumvent established mineral rights agreements isn't just unethical, it's potential RICO territory. Strike one. But Constance was just warming up. Wednesday night, she organized an emergency community action meeting in the Willowbrook clubhouse. 43 residents showed up expecting damage control. Instead, they got a 2-hour descent into madness that would have made conspiracy theorists blush. The stale smell of desperation mixed with burnt coffee as Constance unveiled poster boards covered with printed Facebook comments, satellite photos of my truck, and what appeared to be a hand-drawn organizational chart connecting me to federal energy cartels. "He's been planning this industrial takeover for months," she screeched, pointing at photos like she was briefing Homeland Security. "The children's camp was just cover for corporate espionage." Margaret Pine later told me it was like watching someone have a complete psychotic break, while 40 neighbors sat trapped in folding chairs, too polite to leave. But here's where Constance made her fatal mistake. She announced her protective legal strategy, convincing 2 remaining Loyalist board members to spend the HOA's entire $127,000 emergency fund on a lawsuit claiming I'd used fraudulent documents to extort innocent homeowners. That's when I deployed my countermove. Thursday morning, I showed up at the Willowbrook clubhouse with Sarah Salem and a process server. While Constance was inside planning her next assault, we served the HOA with a restraining order prohibiting any use of community funds for personal legal vendettas. The look on her face when she walked outside to find us standing by her car was worth the filing fees. Pure rage mixed with dawning comprehension that her own neighbors had just cut off her legal funding. But Constance wasn't finished embarrassing herself yet. Friday afternoon brought her masterstroke of self-destruction, a media relations interview with Channel 8 News to correct false narratives about her community protection efforts. She chose the county courthouse steps for the interview. The symbolism was perfect, though probably not how she intended. The reporter started with softball questions, but Constance's answers revealed someone completely detached from reality. When asked about the trespassing footage, she actually said, "I was standing on association property that he's illegally claiming ownership of. But ma'am, according to county records and the deed, that property has belonged to the Morrison family since 1952. Those documents are probably forged. Federal energy law doesn't apply to community property anyway." The reporter's eyebrows climbed so high they nearly reached her hairline. "Are you saying you don't recognize federal jurisdiction over mineral rights?" "I'm saying some diesel mechanic can't use government bureaucracy to steal from honest homeowners." Live, on camera, in front of the courthouse where she'd soon be appearing for federal charges. The interview was supposed to last 15 minutes. It stretched to 45 minutes of Constance providing additional evidence for our federal case while news cameras rolled. She claimed I was exploiting children, called the mineral rights documents suspicious, and suggested the entire legal system was somehow biased against HOAs. The sweet smell of victory mixed with autumn leaves as I watched the footage that evening. Sarah called, laughing so hard she could barely speak. She just handed us enough material for a documentary series. It's the most beautiful legal suicide I've ever witnessed. The interview went viral within hours. Legal experts provided commentary about how not to handle federal charges. Property rights advocates used it as a masterclass in HOA overreach. Even late-night comedy shows featured clips of Constance explaining why federal law didn't apply to her subdivision. By weekend, her own HOA board had formally censured her and banned her from all community property. Neighbors crossed streets to avoid her. The security company had fired the guards she'd hired after they reported her for requesting illegal services. Constance had managed to turn a $2.3 million penalty into a federal investigation, multiple felony charges, and complete social destruction. The woman had become her own worst enemy, and watching it unfold was absolutely magnificent. By the time Constance's TV interview finished destroying what remained of her credibility, the legal machinery was grinding toward inevitable justice with the precision of a Swiss watch. Monday morning brought news that made my coffee taste like liquid victory. The district attorney had filed formal embezzlement charges based on the forensic audit of HOA finances. 3 years of systematic theft, $73,000 in misappropriated funds, and enough fraudulent invoices to wallpaper her McMansion. But Constance wasn't going quietly into that good night. She was going down swinging like a drunken sailor in a hurricane. Her latest strategy involved hiring a crisis management firm that specialized in reputation rehabilitation for misunderstood community leaders. These people charged $500 per hour to help Constance craft a narrative where she was the real victim of my calculated assault on suburban values. The fresh scent of morning dew mixed with the acrid smell of desperation as I watched 3 consultants in expensive suits set up campaign-style signs around Willowbrook. Support community safety, protect property values, stop corporate bullying. They'd turned Constance's legal nightmare into a grassroots political movement. It would have been impressive if it weren't so pathetically delusional. Tuesday brought the first court hearing for the embezzlement charges. I didn't attend, but Margaret Pine did, and her description was poetry. Constance showed up dressed like she was attending a charity gala, flanked by her crisis team and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. When the judge read the charges, 12 counts of theft, 8 counts of fraud, conspiracy to misappropriate community funds, Constance actually tried to interrupt with a prepared statement about defending community interests against federal overreach. The judge shut her down faster than a screen door in a tornado. "Ma'am, this is a criminal proceeding, not a town hall meeting. Save your political speeches for your campaign manager." But the real fireworks happened Wednesday when the federal energy case went to court. Sarah had prepared a presentation that would have made NASA proud. Satellite maps, financial projections, legal precedent dating back to the 1920s. We had enough evidence to convict a parking meter of federal crimes. Constance's attorney tried arguing that the mineral rights lease was antiquated and shouldn't supersede modern community standards. The federal judge's response became legendary among Texas property lawyers. "Counsel, are you suggesting this court should ignore 70 years of established federal energy law because your client found it inconvenient? Because if that's your legal theory, I suggest you find a new profession." The courtroom was packed with reporters, energy industry observers, and about 30 Willowbrook residents who'd come to watch their former dictator face justice. The contrast was stark, me in my cleanest work shirt sitting calmly beside Sarah, while Constance fidgeted in designer clothes that probably cost more than my truck. When the judge announced the penalty enforcement, $2.3 million to be paid by Willowbrook Estates HOA within 90 days, you could hear Constance's gasp echo off the courtroom walls. Several HOA residents actually applauded, which earned them a stern look from the bailiff. But the beautiful part was still coming. Thursday afternoon, the new HOA board held an emergency meeting to address the financial catastrophe Constance had created. The meeting was supposed to be private, but somebody leaked the audio to Channel 8 News, and it was absolutely magnificent. "Ladies and gentlemen," the new president announced, "Mrs. Hartwell's actions have created a financial liability that exceeds our annual budget by 300%. We have 2 options: special assessment fees of $7,600 per household, or negotiate a settlement with Mr. Morrison. The room erupted. 300 homeowners suddenly realized their former HOA president's vendetta against kids fishing was about to cost them more than a luxury car. Voices shouted over each other as neighbors demanded answers, accountability, and Constance's head on a stick. One resident stood up and delivered what became known as the Willowbrook moment. That woman spent 3 years terrorizing a man for letting children fish, and now we're all paying for her personal psychosis. This is insane! The meeting devolved into chaos as residents realized they were facing bankruptcy because their HOA president couldn't tolerate the sound of children's laughter. Some families started talking about selling. Others discussed class action lawsuits against Constance personally. By Friday, the new board had formally voted to remove Constance from all positions, ban her from community property, and pursue personal reimbursement for damages caused by her unauthorized actions outside the scope of her duties. The coup de grace came Friday evening when local news aired a follow-up interview with families from my camp. Kids who'd been terrorized by Constance's rampage spoke directly to cameras about how the mean lady yelled at us for roasting marshmallows. 8-year-old Tommy, the same kid who'd dropped his marshmallow during Constance's assault, looked directly into the camera and said, "Why was she so mad about fishing? Fishing is fun." Out of the mouths of babes, the woman had declared war on childhood itself, and childhood had won. Saturday afternoon, exactly 1 month after Constance's spectacular meltdown, felt like the entire universe had realigned itself toward justice. The barn amphitheater I'd built during my planning phase was packed with 300 people who'd come to witness the official end of the HOA wars and the beginning of something beautiful. Local media had set up cameras to document what Channel 8 was calling the community triumph over suburban tyranny. The hydraulic stage system I'd installed using my diesel mechanic knowledge rose 8 feet above the crowd with mechanical precision, creating a perfect platform for speakers, while lake water sparkled in the background like nature's own spotlight. Solar panels powered LED lighting that would illuminate the evening celebration, and the whole setup looked like something between a county fair and a corporate presentation. But this wasn't about showing off my DIY skills. This was about showing the world what happens when communities choose cooperation over control. Sheriff Deputy Jake opened the event by reading a proclamation from the county commissioners recognizing Camp Minnow as an official community asset contributing to youth education and environmental stewardship. The crowd applauded, but the real fireworks were just getting started. Sarah Salem took the stage next, spreading large format prints of the legal documents that had changed everything. Satellite maps showing pipeline routes, financial projections for energy development, and most importantly, the settlement agreement that would transform Constance's $2.3 million penalty into permanent community benefits. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah announced, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater, "we're here to celebrate more than just legal victory. We're here to launch the Morrison Community Trust, funded entirely by penalty payments from those who tried to destroy what we're building together." The sweet smell of barbecue smoke mixed with lake water and autumn leaves as she detailed the Trust's mission. Permanent endowment for Camp Minnow ensuring free outdoor education for children forever. Scholarship fund providing $150,000 annually for local students pursuing environmental studies. Senior citizen transportation service using hybrid vehicles funded by energy royalties. But the real mic drop moment came when I took the stage to address the crowd that included former enemies, current friends, and families whose children had been terrorized for the crime of enjoying nature. "Folks, I want to tell you about something my grandfather used to say. He'd say, 'Dex, property rights aren't just about owning land. They're about making sure bullies don't win and good people have places to build memories.'" The crowd grew quiet as I pointed toward the dock where kids were already fishing, their laughter carrying across water that had witnessed 3 generations of childhood joy. Constance Hartwell thought she could use fear, intimidation, and legal threats to steal something that belonged to all of us. She spent 3 years and $73,000 of her neighbor's money trying to silence the sound of children's laughter. I paused, letting that sink in while news cameras captured every word. Well, I've got news for anyone else who thinks they can bully communities into submission. Those children's voices just bought permanent protection for everything we value. Every dollar she stole, every threat she made, every law she broke, it all got converted into something that will outlast every HOA in Texas. The applause started slow, then built into something that felt like thunder rolling across the hill country. Parents whose kids had been terrorized were cheering. Willowbrook residents who'd been held hostage by their own HOA were crying. Even some of the energy company executives were clapping for community cooperation over corporate exploitation. But the most beautiful moment came when 8-year-old Tommy, the same kid who dropped his marshmallow during Constance's assault, walked up to the microphone with his fishing pole in one hand and a bluegill in the other. "Thank you for not letting the mean lady stop our fishing camp," he said with the clear honesty that only children possess. "My fish says thank you too." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause that could probably be heard 3 counties away. News reporters scrambled to capture the moment that perfectly encapsulated what this whole war had really been about. Margaret Pine took the stage last, representing the community coalition that had supported Camp Minnow through its darkest days. "What we've learned is that communities are stronger than any individual who tries to control them. Constance thought she owned us all. Instead, she taught us that we own our own future." As the sun set over the lake, families gathered around renewed campfires while children roasted marshmallows in the exact spot where Constance had launched her final assault. The contrast was perfect. Community celebration where there had once been conflict, children's joy where there had been adult rage. The last speaker was the new Willowbrook HOA president, who delivered the evening's final mic drop moment. To any other HOA leaders watching this, remember, your job is to serve your community, not rule it. The age of suburban dictatorships is over. Game, set, match. 6 months later, you'd never recognize the place where one woman's hatred tried to destroy childhood joy. The Morrison Community Trust has become a model for rural cooperation that's being studied by agricultural colleges across 3 states. What started as a fight over kids' fishing rights turned into proof that communities can beat corporate pressure and suburban tyranny when they work together. Camp Minnow now serves 85 children every weekend, with a waiting list that stretches into next year. We've added environmental education programs, basic mechanical workshops where kids learn to fix small engines, and evening astronomy sessions that pack the barn amphitheater with families eager to escape screen time for Storytime. The permanent endowment generates enough income to keep everything free forever. No registration fees, no equipment costs, no hidden charges that exclude kids whose families can't afford suburban recreation programs. Just children learning to catch fish, build fires, and respect the natural world that's becoming rarer every year. The scholarship program has already changed 12 young lives. This fall, we're sending 4 graduating seniors to study environmental engineering, 3 to pursue sustainable agriculture, and 5 to learn conservation science. These kids grew up fishing on grandfather's lake, and now they're preparing to protect places like it for the next generation. But the sweetest victory is what happened to Willowbrook Estates itself. The new HOA board eliminated petty rule enforcement, reduced dues by 40%, and converted their community center into a year-round venue for family events. Property values actually increased 15% once neighbors stopped living in fear of their own governance. They even started their own children's programs. Saturday morning nature walks, community gardens where kids learn to grow vegetables, and monthly cookouts that bring families together instead of driving them apart. Turns out people prefer cooperation to intimidation. Who knew? As for Constance, she pleaded guilty to embezzlement charges, received 2 years probation, and paid $73,000 in restitution to her former neighbors. Her house went up for sale 3 months ago with a price-reduced sign that gets bigger every week. Turns out being the most hated person in East Texas isn't great for property values. Last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona and was already complaining about her new HOA's landscaping policies. Some people never learn. The real magic happens during our monthly Community Heritage Days, when 3 generations gather to share stories about how rural neighborhoods used to work before subdivision rules and property management companies turned neighbors into strangers. Kids learn from grandparents who remember when communities raised children together instead of regulating them separately. Margaret Pine now serves as Camp Minnow's volunteer education coordinator, teaching children the same lessons about respect, responsibility, and environmental stewardship that she spent 30 years sharing in public school classrooms. Watching her explain pond ecosystems to 8-year-olds while they catch their first base reminds me why grandfather fought so hard to protect this place. The energy development proceeded exactly as planned, with horizontal drilling that never disturbed a single lawn or interrupted a single family barbecue. Quarterly royalty payments fund community improvements while proving that environmental protection and economic development can coexist when people choose cooperation over conflict. My personal life changed too. Sarah Salem and I discovered that fighting corporate bullies together creates pretty strong foundations for building other things together. We're planning a spring wedding in the barn amphitheater surrounded by the families whose children will inherit whatever legacy we build here. But the most important change is harder to measure. Children who were terrorized for enjoying nature now understand that adults will protect their right to childhood joy. Parents who were intimidated into silence learned that communities are stronger than any individual trying to control them. Every weekend I watch new families discover that kids can still catch fish with their hands, roast marshmallows without permits, and laugh loud enough to echo off water without violating anyone's peace. The sound that drove Constance to destruction now draws people from surrounding counties who want their children to experience authentic outdoor education.